Welcome, everyone, to Local Grit. I am with Heather and Noah, the genius behind Mystic Ramen on King William here in Hamilton. And I have to say, it's one of the best restaurants I've ever been to. It's so unique and so interesting. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thanks so much, Alex.
So Mystic Ramen has a very, like, if you look at your branding and you look at how your restaurant is laid up and who you hire, there's a very intentional feel to your restaurant. What's the origin story behind that, and how did you get to where you were today?
Well, I think Heather and I had been working in this industry off and on for a lot of our adult life, I would say. And really, I think when we moved back to Hamilton from Toronto, maybe 13 years ago now.
Yeah, I was born and raised here, but Noah and I met in Toronto and we lived there together for a long time. And then when I was pregnant with our second son, who you know, we moved back to Hamilton, and that's when Noah decided he was going to go to culinary school. And I would say that's probably where it began.
Yeah, I think on the more global
and they had to do a project at school.
Yeah, I mean, I had worked informally in kitchens for a long time, but my true passion has always been Japanese culture and food, all aspects of Japanese culture. I studied martial arts for about 5 years in my youth, so I was well acquainted with traditional Japanese philosophies and certainly from a cultural perspective, very interested in the flavors, techniques, and ingredients used in Japanese cuisine. So I made that my focus in independent study projects through culinary school. And when I came out the other side, I started working in different restaurants around Hamilton. The food scene was relatively new for me then. And I ended up working at one point at a small little restaurant on Colborne by the Bank of Montreal called Bar Izakaya. Bar Izakaya was started by Eat Industries at the time, which was a friend of ours, Matthew Pigeon, and his partner, Brandon and Claire. And so they were looking for someone to consult on the menu who had experience with Japanese cuisine because they weren't as versed in those cuisines. They came from the Mark McEwen group in Toronto, by Mark specifically. So brought me on board to sort of help flesh out the early concept there. But it only lasted a year. It was a tough sell. I think that part of Hamilton's food scene on that stretch of James was still developing. And I think a lot of businesses were struggling to get people to cross the sort of invisible line at Canon. A lot of people won't come down that far from the offices.
Right. And it wasn't burgers and pizza.
It wasn't burgers and pizza. So it was a hard sell, I think, in the beginning. But it certainly stoked my interest. We tried doing ramen there actually as well.
Well, they already had the ramen shop in the market at that point.
Yeah,
right?
so,
That's what inspired them to open Bar Izakaya on James Street North. And then when that ended, you went across the street.
I went across the street and worked at Salt Lick. I ran that restaurant for maybe a year. I worked there for a couple of years total with Shane McCarthy. And but that wasn't my passions. It's just something that I pivoted to after.
Well, you still learned a lot about it. Noah is the kind of chef that, or the kind of human in general, that when he's interested in goes down rabbit holes. So we still have about 75 books on Southern barbecue in this house.
I'm the same way. It becomes a problem. I go hardcore research mode, and Rachel has to be like, okay, reeling it in. We have kids here.
The barbecue book collection is only rivaled by obviously the Japanese food and culture collection of books and YouTube channels here. So then when Noah left Salt Lake, he was pretty tired. That, he worked really, really long hours there. Shane was in Mexico at the time, and so Noah was just sort of the head chef and just working like 90 hours a week. It was insane. I had 2 toddlers at home. We were tired. And then Brandon had moved over to the market. They had closed Bar Zakaya. They were just in the market, and he just wanted some help for the summer part-time. And Noah said, like, should I take it? I said, babe, you've been working so hard. Just go and work part-time for the summer and the spring, and then we'll figure it out in the fall. Just go take a break. Well, Noah hadn't been there for 2 months when Brandon said, you know what? Claire and I are going to move the family to Sutton, Quebec. Do you and Heather want to buy this business?
Wow.
Yeah. And Noah came home and said, well, what do you think? And I said, sure. And he said, well, what if it doesn't work? I said, well, then we'll do something else. And so we just jumped. And that's kind of how I like to do things. Noah is a little bit maybe less impulsive
Yeah.
than but I think that's why we're a good balance. Cause I say, sure. And we figure it out as we go, where Noah's definitely much more like research, and like he'll, for example, research 17 different recipes before he decides what he's going to do. Right. Whereas I'm just like, yeah. And we figure it out as we're jumping out of the plane.
Yeah.
So that's how we came to buy the stall in the market.
Yeah.
And then immediately people started.
Well, yeah, I mean, so the brand was Slurp Ramen, and it was focused on tonkatsu style ramen, which is a pork bone based broth. And, we were, that's the model or the mold that, fell into my lap. But after buying the business, I immediately realized that, I needed to rebrand for my personal reasons. Like, I needed to put myself and my personality into the brand. And so we, that's when I really started to dream with Heather, this Mystic Ramen concept into existence. So it kind of was born out of my imagination and referencing from pieces of my life and interest in pop culture that say more about who I am as a person, as an artist, as a chef. So hence all the references to, some of my personal inspirations in the realm of music. Music has always been really important to me. I went to school in Boulder, Colorado at a university, a liberal arts college called Naropa University, where I studied a lot of multimedia performance art. So, when I understood when we were branding that, that it needed to be encompassing all of my other interests creatively. So, and a lot of that was, iconic artists like David Bowie, John Lennon and Yoko Ono,
Freddie Mercury,
Queen, glam rock, that time in the 70s. I grew up, I was born in the 70s and 76. And I think that part of pop culture was really imprinted in me in the 80s, the early 80s and mid 80s.
Growing up in Toronto too for Noah, right? There's a lot of.
I grew up in Toronto as well. So, I mean, that sort of found its way into the brand. And
maybe to speak to the mystic as well, like that's sort of a double entendre for us. Like, number one, again, Noah's saying he went to this liberal arts college. He was also a yoga teacher and a meditation instructor, as was I.
Yeah.
That's when we met. I had a yoga studio in Toronto. That's how we met. My landlord and Noah were longtime friends. So there was that element of like, yeah, we're into the woo-woo. And even at the time, I was still teaching yoga full time. When we opened in the market. So the mysticism of it was very real for us, but also it was a nod to Pizza, which was a sort of a campy movie from the 90s with
early 90s or late
Julia
80s?
Roberts. Anyway,
Yeah.
so
I
Mystic
remember.
Ramen.
I remember. Yeah.
Yeah. So when we were playing with names for a long time, Ado Dog was in the running, and then one person said, "No, don't do that. Don't put dog in the name." And so we were really,
I liked it.
Noah still really likes it, but we went with Mystic Ramen. And that's why the Mystic is also sort of
the font is Devanagari script from the Sanskrit tradition, which I studied I studied Sanskrit for a long time,
Mm,
uh, yoga, and so yeah, that Mystic came about through a lot of those different channels. But yeah, it's very loaded. I think the sort of uh, all of the representation of our personalities and pathways in life kind of coalescing,
Hmm.
converging together, and the mystical point with something about making soup and ramen, which is a lot like alchemy. So that
right.
was something that I think we felt lined up really well. This idea of who we are as sort of mystical uh, adventurers, and this craft that I was going to turn into my new discipline.
Yeah, you guys totally nailed the branding then. Like now that you've told me that, when I think of those, for those just listening, not watching, but Heather's wearing their hat with their logo on it. It does have that 70s rock artistic. It is more about artistry in the delivery of the food and the staff that you hire. So that's something that you saw missing or from the Hamilton scene that you felt that this fit perfectly in. Is that how you chose ramen to get there? Or is it really just you love ramen?
Well, I think for me it was Japanese food. I actually wanted to do an izakaya. Which is, as you know, like a gastropubs, Japanese gastropubs, where the salary men and women of Japan go to eat and socialize after work. Small plates, craft beers, and sake. That was really my initial inspiration. And then the ramen sort of fell in my lap because Brandon and Claire were selling that business, but it was still in my wheelhouse. So I was like, okay, why not ramen? Let's really go down this rabbit hole. And as Heather said, I really did.
Yeah.
I jumped
He
all
still does.
head first.
He
Yeah.
still does. When we opened this computer screen this morning, it was on from last night after I went to sleep. It was still on a ramen video on YouTube. Like it's still a constantly
Yeah,
learning for Noah, which is why
I'm
I
known for
think the
falling asleep to YouTube videos. Yeah, I will be with just the iPad and it's just fallen asleep and I've watched some sort of marketing video. So I can totally relate. Let's get into the ramen just specifically because ramen does have a steep tradition or deep tradition rather. And where do you stay purist in all of your research and where do you deliberately break the rules?
I
Well,
love this question, Alex. It's so good.
yeah, this is a great question. I mean, what's interesting about ramen from a food perspective, a Japanese food perspective, is that um, a lot of, as you say, traditional Japanese cooking has a lot of structure and a lot of rules. When we talk about washoku, which is the general term for Japanese cuisine, but then you have other branches of washoku like kaiseki. Kaiseki is a tradition that is very formal and very structured, very rigid in its structure. It's hyper seasonal and local. You can't really break out of this traditional methods there. But ramen as a food culture in Japan is actually considered like the rock and roll. It's very maverick. So it has a structure, a very clearly defined structure. And that is usually people talk about the 5 components of ramen. And so basically ramen is a noodle soup. And the first most important component is the broth. So ramen has to have broth. It has to have noodles. It has to have a seasoning sauce called tare that is used to flavor and season the broth itself. Aroma oil, which is a layer of fat on top, which is usually infused with some aromatics, and then toppings. So as long as you stay within that
The noodles, did you say
formula,
noodles?
I did say noodles,
Okay.
yeah. Then it is ramen. It can be ramen. And outside of that, there's a lot of room to play and put your personality into the food. So you'll see in Japan a lot of former salarymen leaving the business world to open up a ramen shop because it's a way that they can express themselves and put
Right.
their soul and into the cuisine, which is rarer in Japan as far as other styles of Japanese cooking. So really, in the ways that I stayed pure is like we offer things on the menu, and I follow that 5-point structure.
Yep.
We do have on the menu like our Tokyo shoyu, which are an homage to more traditional flavors and Japanese styles of ramen. Shoyu is one of the most popular styles of ramen. Its shoyu refers to the seasoning sauce, so it's a soy-based tare in this in this context. But then, my personality comes through in the sort of fusion style, I guess you would say. I incorporate a lot of other Asian flavors into my bowl that are not traditionally Japanese.
Mm-hmm.
For example, our cow soy bowl, obviously, is a reference to northern Chinese Thai food, Chiang Mai flavors there.
The Tantan Men is a
The
Taiwanese
Tantan Men
inspired
is
ramen.
more of a Taiwanese inspired dish, but that is also traditionally found in a lot of ramen shops in Japan. People will often have a Tantan Men because, a lot of what people don't understand is that ramen isn't actually Japanese. It's relatively new to Japan. It's only been in Japan for about 100 years in the popular culture, and
Oh,
it
wow.
came from China. So
Yeah.
it's originally called chuka soba or china soba, which was more of a derogatory term meaning Chinese noodles. So it then
Mhm.
became ramen later on in the 30s and 50s. So it really what I'm doing isn't really revolutionary. It's actually something that is traditionally happened in Japan organically, uh, coming from China, and the influences of the other Asian immigrant populations in that part of the world. So I would say, again, that we do offer a lot of traditional bowls, and then where we sort of stand out is, or what makes us unique, is that we do have these other fusion elements and this my experimental side too. Like I just like to sort of see what would, we did a special once for Aretha Franklin. We were,
That was great. The
just
soul bowl.
thinking of what would Aretha Franklin's ramen look like if she was. And so I came up with this idea of like, okay, it's got to have obviously karaage, which is fried chicken. It's got to have a little bit of spiciness. So we did this yuzu kosho, which is a traditional condiment made from chili peppers and yuzu peel, green chili peppers, and sweet potato chips. We put that into the bowl. So I think trying to bring all of those elements together to sort of pay homage to Southern food, soul food.
Stardust bowl?
And then we had the Ziggy Stardust Bowl, which is my homage to David Bowie. We were doing that around Bowie's birthday.
We did some David Bowie brunches where we played vinyl nights. And
so that one was more about the aesthetics. So I used silver food glitter, and I cut out
such a
bunch
cute
of
bowl.
carrot flowers.
They looked like stars.
That looked like red carrot flowers, so that they would look like those David Bowie images from the 70s.
Wow.
The kimchi's ramen.
Kimchi's ramen. Yes, that's also, again, homage to Korean cuisine, which I also love, not just Japanese, but you'll see Thai, Korean, Japanese, and Chinese. This what I eat, I would say, by choice 90% of the time. So yeah, you'll see a lot of cultural references of foods and flavor and styles that I grew up eating on the streets of Toronto, really, because that's what we did. I went to school near Chinatown.
Yeah.
So you'll see that in my food. Indian as well.
And every bowl looks amazing that I've had there. I've had the Tantan Man, and you have a mushroom medley.
Most beautiful bowl.
So good and so filling. I think that's a lot of people might not know, is that you think that ramen, it's like I'm having soup. How's that at dinner? But it is really like I've always feel full afterwards, and it's really, you have good protein selections, and you even have a vegan. You've really leaned into that. Has that been a good choice, having the vegan options?
For sure. So one of our sort of taglines or tenets, I guess, is inclusive dining, and that's very all in things. So that means that we have a very robust vegan menu, frankly. It's not just like the option, I think we have 5 or 6 vegan ramen
Yep.
bowls, and a vegan rice bowl. We have vegan appetizers, desserts. We have gluten-free options. We can accommodate diets. We have a kids menu, and I think the plant-based community has been a great champion for us. And I think having those really options for them, definitely, of course, it serves us. I honestly think not to diss any other restaurant owners, but I think it's foolish to not have some great plant-based options these days. It's
I
only
agree.
going to I think the vegan community is only going to grow.
Yeah. Yeah. No, definitely. I think it's a smart choice to be inclusive. Definitely.
I also really interesting what you can do with plant-based things. Like we have a vegan egg, and it's still, even though we've had it for 6 years, 5 years now, I still think it's fascinating that we can have a thing that has no animal products in it whatsoever, but resembles an egg. Like it looks like an egg in the bowl.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
It is amazing. Definitely.
Yeah.
So shifting a little bit. So then speaking of customers and you definitely have keep the customer in mind when you're creating your menu. And I think that some people get wrapped up in the mistake of only seeing their vision and forgetting that there's a customer. You guys definitely have not overlooked that for sure. But what's one operational detail that customers wouldn't notice, but that you guys obsess over daily? I think I know the answer, but I would love to hear your answer.
I know my answer.
Yeah, I think our answers would be different because Heather is, the front of house and customer service.
You go ahead. What's your answer? I know what mine is. Well, mine is the Python log. And I have nothing to do with it, to be clear. This is our back of house team that has,
Right.
It's called the Python log. I always laugh when I see it because it makes me think of Captain's log, in Star Trek.
Yeah.
But they obsess every single day when they're making that Python. So Python, if you haven't been to Mystic Ramen, Python is our signature broth. It is a rich chicken broth. It is made in a kettle the size of something that you could take
It's
a bath
40,
in.
yeah, so it's a 40-gallon steam kettle. The broth, they say in ramen, soul of the soup or the soul of the bowl.
Yeah.
So you have to that's your starting point. That's where you will be judged or critiqued from any kind kind of knowledgeable ramen consumer. Ramen head is what they call them in Japan.
So they use like meter sticks. They measure with the
scientific.
Yeah, it's
very scientific. We have a refractor measure the bricks, the viscosity of the soup to make sure that it's consistent. We use measuring sticks in the kettle to determine the appropriate broth levels before we bail the soups. So broth is certainly something we obsess over, but to be honest, I obsess over every detail of the bowls. I'm constantly tinkering, and that comes out of this philosophy again in Japan called kaizen, and kaizen to this like a little better every day. You're constantly looking for areas that you can improve, and I'm never satisfied. I think on some level, and if I have gotten to a point where I don't feel like it can get any better, then I get kind of bored, right? So I'm a creative person, so if there's no room for growth or expansion, then there's no room for me to create. So I'm constantly looking to improve, and I think for me, I just obsess about all the little details. But the broth is certainly one because it's so important.
I love hearing our team speaking out about the broth every day. It's absolutely like people would not understand like the language and the excitement. Like there's so much love into that broth. People have no idea.
Yeah. No, that's very interesting. So Noah, what would you agree with that answer, or do you have a different answer?
No, I was going to say from a food perspective, it's definitely, you could say broth, but you could also say I obsess over ingredients. I obsess over, sourcing the best ingredients that I can within our budget to put into the bowls. So I'm generally an obsessive person when it comes to
it's true story.
craft.
Yeah.
So,
I find that
you know,
most entrepreneurs are. We do kind of obsess over things. And as you guys were talking about the broth, for me, it just reminded me of like scales in music, which most people think is boring. And I'm sure a lot of people think that broth is boring, but scales is what sparks everything. And you never know it all. So there's a way to obsess over every scale and how you play it over every chord. And that is the artistry that makes what music is, and in your case, make excellent food. You mentioned building with margins. The restaurant industry is a tight business, so what systems do you have or decisions that you do that makes it financially stable? Because that's where most restaurants really struggle.
Are we financially stable?
Yeah,
and I think that is struggle. I think
music school
ultimately
owner, I'm with you guys.
in this economy, I think sometimes that's all there is for restaurants is struggle. I think restaurants, as I think people can now see that like it's become very voyeuristic in terms of the reality TV shows and the YouTube channels, where you follow the life or day inside of a restaurant operations. Or Gordon Ramsay has a new program now on Netflix where they go into the building of his next flagship uh, restaurant on the top of this giant building in London. And you really get the sense that even at that level, there's no guarantees with restaurants.
Yeah,
The
he's still
margins
stressed out about it
are so
working.
thin, and the market and is changing rapidly, especially post pandemic, where takeout is a huge thing now. Gen Z is drinking less, so that affects restaurants' bottom line. There's lots of numbers I could throw out at you because I've had to learn a lot about numbers. That's, in with this business.
Yeah,
But I won't go into those nitty gritty details. But basically, the industry's shifting, and restaurant margins traditionally were a 30-30-30-10 model, where 30% was labor, 30% was food costs, 30% was overhead like rent and electricity, and then
yeah,
10% was left profit. But those numbers, those are not realistic anymore. Labor is one thing I talk about with a lot of our fellow entrepreneurs, particularly in the restaurant industry. Labor has completely changed
yeah,
because that's something we consciously made a decision to do. But we pay a living wage at Mystic Ramen. We've never done the minimum wage thing. We
yeah,
recognize that the cost of living is rising for everyone, not just small businesses, but everyone employed by small businesses. Inflation in the rental market, interest rates at the bank, mortgages. So everyone is struggling.
yeah.
And I think labor, we no longer have this model where we can say labor's at 35% would be, sort of the high ceiling. But our labor approaches much higher levels. And part of that is because of a conscious choice that we made to pay a living wage.
And to pay for we have benefit program for our staff as well, which to be honest, we implemented long before we could afford it. We still can't really afford it, but
Wow.
it's important to us. We split the cost of it with our staff. I'll be clear, but it is an added expense every month that it's just a non-negotiable for us, but it does make our labor costs really high. And I think that one of the ways that we've countered that is mostly Noah. He spends one of the big leaps between moving from the market to King William is that Noah he does very little cooking now, and he's mostly a shopper.
Yeah,
Because him going to wholesale club, him driving to Mississauga every week to buy noodles that are handmade by a second generation Japanese Canadian, these things all save us money. They save us a lot of money on our food costs so that they can balance out the labor costs. Not
right.
enough,
Yeah,
but they can a little bit, And I think if anything, I would say that's if there is a financial stability anywhere, which I don't really feel that there is, to be honest. I think we're working towards that. This is, in my mind, this is our stabilizing year. So good luck to us.
yeah,
But I think it's a lot of Noah's legwork that we don't, that he does so much of the shopping instead of ordering things in.
Yeah, there's
right.
only really two costs that you can control in the restaurant, and that's labor and food. And
Yep.
so, it takes and I don't say this begrudgingly either. It takes the amount of people that we employ to make this business work, especially with
Yeah.
ramen. It's labor intensive, and with our commitment to small batch craft ramen is what we call it. It's made fresh daily, and every component of your bowl is handmade. We use very few ready-made products that come out of a jar, and it's a lot of labor, and it's something that when we scaled up to this level at Mystic Ramen from the market, I wasn't really prepared for. I didn't have the foresight to understand, like, scaling up by 100 times how much
Right.
labor that require. But as a result, I think of our commitment to our labor force, I think we have a lot of retention. So if there is stability on some level, I would say in our restaurant, it's really retention in the amazing employees that we've been able to attract to us and that have stayed with us on this journey for the last 3 years. Incredible staff.
We're really lucky with our team for sure. And I think that's important to note is like, we can talk about them as labor,
Yeah.
but like these are human that we feel so grateful for and so responsible to, and we want them. That's part of what I love about having a restaurant. And it's part of what I think about. If we were ever to expand, that would be one of my biggest motivators, would be to create more employment opportunities where people could feel valued,
Yeah. No, I think living in Toronto really was a real help. Like, we opened our music school in Toronto first because we lived there, and we paid above what most schools pay. It's usually more than it's double minimum wage. And then when we came to Hamilton and we started hiring people, when we told how much we paid, they're like, really? And it was an eye opener for us. I was like, well, you've got to live, right? And they're like, yeah, nobody pays that much here. But it's like, you're doing, as you say, like, you are so valuable. We're here to serve you and our families. That's our role. It's not top down. And I know that you guys have a very similar philosophy, and it's the same thing. Our employees are amazing, and we have retention. And when we closed the Toronto location, I was like heartbroken having to call people to say that they didn't have a job anymore. They
Sure.
all were like, "Oh my gosh, that's so terrible. Is there anything I can do for you?" And I was like blown away at how much, because like, I've just taken away your livelihood because, COVID killed everything. And and I think when you treat people well, they are people, and you need to know them as people. And I hear what you're saying. I don't think of them as labor either. I think of, these are our teachers, and they're the strong pillars of our business, for sure.
Of course.
Speaking of which, what also helps with a lot of businesses is being community driven, and you guys seem to be very community. You're very aware of the community, and was that strategic? I get the feeling from our conversation it was very strategic, but also, was it kind of organic, or was it survival?
Yeah,
Little
I
bit of
think
I think it's both, really. It's organic in that I think Heather and I, as humans, always, wherever we find ourselves, like to build community. Heather, in particular, when I came to Toronto after living in the States for 14 years, had built a little community, and Heather was at the hub of it. And I think that's in part what I gravitated towards, is that Heather was building community in Toronto, and I think that's what she does everywhere she goes. It's just a natural, I think,
I like
intrinsic
people.
part of who she is.
Well, and I'm a caretaker too, right? And so I think that's what community is like, we take care of each other, right? So, and also when we opened in the market, as I mentioned earlier, I was teaching yoga full time, and I was also teaching at, gosh, I don't know, 3 or 4 different gyms around the city. And so I had that community of people who I was helping to support in my teaching, and who in turn could not have been happier to come and support our new business.
Yeah.
And I would say like that my yoga community in those early days were some of the biggest supporters we had, and still to this day are some of the biggest supporters that we have, even though I haven't taught in years now. So yeah, I would think it was intentional, and and also just organic, just because of who we are as people. And also my job has always been public facing. So even when we were in Toronto and I was in bars, like we were always public facing.
Yeah. I think also, um, I wanted to create a space because this is also, we can go back to my multimedia performance art days where I was studying a lot of black box theater and immersive environments. And I really do view restaurants as a kind of theater, a kind of performance, but also a gathering point, a place where people come together, obviously to celebrate, to celebrate life, milestones, important events, also just a place to meet, and conviviality and food and drinks. I think we all come together around those things. So I was aware of what a restaurant is or should be, in my estimation, is a place where people can come together and uh, just gather with the ones they love to share moments with and create memories. And so my theater, this restaurant was that I wanted it to feel like, an immersive experience. It was, that's hitting you on, through all the senses. And then there was this desire to create a space that welcomed in members of the community that are often marginalized.
I say we could
So
probably speak to the Whala days together.
yeah,
Also, Noah and I worked at a bar in Toronto together in Leslieville called Whala. Which same thing. It was opened as a bar and it became a community hub. And then a lot of it was a gay bar. The owner never wanted to call it a gay bar because he wanted everyone to feel welcome, but it was a gay bar.
Right. Yeah.
Everyone was welcome, but all of the gays, that had sort of moved out of Cabbagetown and into Leslieville at that time, 20 years ago, they didn't know each other yet. And so Whala was a place where they all came together and we were there. I was a bartender, Noah was a chef, Noah was sometimes a DJ there. It was the best time. And we created friendships that, again, even those customers that we served and became friends in Leslieville now some of them have also moved to Hamilton. And if they haven't moved to Hamilton, if they're in the city, they come and visit us at Mystic Ramen. So I think there was also a desire for us. We loved those Whala days. They were like pre-children. They were very special, fun times.
Yes.
And I think, remember those days
Yeah.
before the kids?
No,
and so,
I don't.
No.
It's all a blur.
So I think when we went to King William, I said, oh my God, I want to have a drag brunch so bad. And I would say that our drag brunches are one of my absolute favorite things about our restaurant. And we do them, 4 or 5 times a year. Community that has built around those, even like it's like a community within the community.
Right.
There are people every time the next drag brunch gets announced, they buy their tickets and they sit together and they've become friendly with each other. And the community part, it's just a culmination.
it's a safe space where we it's an extension of our values too, and what we want to in the culture, and we want to be part of this positive change in the way that that to be inclusive and support all members of our community regardless of their gender identity, sexual persuasion, race, all of those things. We really learned a lot, I think, from our experiences at Whala Bar and in that community. I think Mystic Ramen had to incorporate some of those core values for us, and so that's
Yeah,
very
that's
intentional.
amazing. And then so shifting from the market to King William, which is that's a strong street. It's got a really strong identity. How was that transition going from it was
Well,
must have been yeah.
It was wild. It was wild.
that
was-
was
I think there was so much disbelief, like even in the early days of like construction and just being on the streets. Like I remember standing on King William going, how do I have a restaurant in King William? How is this possible?
Yeah.
Like I'm not an 11-year-old girl saying like, I'm going to have a restaurant. I never envisioned that for myself. This all
Right.
felt like it was very much just like an organic journey that brought us to this point. And King William was like, I think I personally had some imposter syndrome for a long time. And I think sometimes I still may.
I certainly do. I think we what became clear to us at the market, we started in 2019 on this ramen journey.
Yep.
2019. And after I rebranded, redesigned the menu, and sort of went in a different direction, we moved from a pork bone soup to a chicken-based broth. Chicken and plant-based is what I chose to focus on, and we dropped out the pork. And then I think it really took off. We all of a sudden, I was saying something that was a little different from the other ramen scenes that were, that had been in Hamilton first. We had Kenzo Ramen on King Street and Shiro Ramen up on the mountain. And I think what happened was there was this sudden, like, it just took off. Like the curve was straight up, and
Right.
our business started doubling and then tripling, and then we outgrew the market very quickly. And
Yeah.
so then COVID hit, and we were in the midst of opening up a restaurant on Barton that got kiboshed because of that. And
Right.
I'm grateful for that, unforeseen boon at the time, but because I don't know that would have worked over there. It was already too small, I think, by the time we started. So then after COVID, I think That's My Jam had occupied the space on King William that we are currently in. And they announced that they were closing, and I was actually working at the market. And somebody told me, "Oh, this space
I
is
called
coming,"
you.
Heather called me and said, "Oh, this space is coming up for lease. That's My Jam is closing." And I ran over there. I literally stopped what I was doing at the market, and I ran over there. I knew that space would go very quickly, and that it was
Yep.
an opportunity. It was 5 minutes away from our current operation at the market, but we needed to transition into something larger because the community was making it clear they needed access to us, and we had something here that people wanted. So I
Yep.
ran over and literally stuck my foot in the door and talked to Niku, who was the owner behind That's My Ramen, and he
That's
was
My Jam.
That's My Jam, That's My Ramen. And I said, look, all business locally, we really would love this opportunity if you would consider basically working with us to get our foot in the door here, and we could take over your lease. And very graciously, him and his partner, very graciously, welcomed us in and helped us secure that spot. And and then from there, it was just bananas. The last 3 years have been a chaos. Just the exponential growth, like literally, as I was saying before, we've grown more than 10 times in terms of staff. We went from a staff of 3 to 25. We went from doing maybe $80,000 in sales a year to $1.4 million in sales last year.
Wow.
That's in sales. We're not rich people.
Yeah, that's not
Yeah.
no profit there
I-
for the sales.
People talk revenue, and it's like,
Yeah,
what are
I love-
costs with that revenue? Yeah.
That's right.
But that's the kind of expansion we're talking about. And I had never managed anything on this scale before. So like there's a huge learning curve, and there still is. We're still trying to figure it out. Because we did just jump again into this investment, into this opportunity. And
I think one of the things we might have underestimated was, if we had opened up, say, a burger place, there are lots and lots and lots of skilled line cooks in the city who we could have hired, But
Right.
ramen is people are literally learning a different language. They're using techniques they've never used before. They're working with ingredients they've never worked with before. And so growing our team, I think, took way longer than we anticipated. And it took us a long time because we weren't compromising, right? We weren't just going to be like, oh, well, here we are. Now we can compromise on the product. Like, of course not. Now we had to, if anything, we had to level up. And it also meant like Noah couldn't be in the restaurant every day because now there were so many other things that he had to take care of. Right.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I would, the first thing we underestimated and the most challenging thing in that transition was getting this a skilled team in place and finding the right people to do that.
Yeah.
I would say that this part, for me anyway, the service part was fun immediately. I was so happy. I was so delighted every time somebody walked in the doors. For months and months and months, I would, I was in the restaurant. If we were open, I was in the restaurant on the floor for a long time.
Yeah.
And now, of course, very different. And it's wonderful now to have a team also in place in the front of the house that I can also just say, I'm not coming in till Thursday, guys. I'll be at home in the home office. You got
Yeah.
this. And I know that they do, right? And I
That's
would
an
say
amazing skill. It's hard for business owners to give up that like that. And a lot of people want to control. And Rachel and I never wanted to have to manage and to babysit. We're adults
Right.
here. If if you're losing students, you're on your own. Like, this is meritocracy very much. You need to have that. And we hire like that, which is interesting because the front of staff that I've seen are all amazing. They make it such an enjoyable experience. And so do you hire, like, how do you keep that going? Because we learned a long time ago that when we hired PhD students, we would lose students. When we hired someone who just loved being in a band, we retained students because that was our brand. We were not making the Royal Conservatory proteges. We wanted to have music. And I think you guys have a very similar philosophy, but I know that the restaurant business, and you guys are heroes for going into it for sure, is very high stress. How do you maintain how do you hire well to meet that stress?
I mean, I think if I had an all-encompassing overarching thing, my aunt was a very successful saleswoman in the insurance world in the 80s, which was a very male-dominated field, and she was responsible for hiring her team. And the one thing that she told me that always sticks with me is you never hire anyone that you wouldn't sit down and have dinner with and be happy to do so.
Great advice.
Right? And from that, I hire on vibes. I really do. If we sit down and I'm not, I have to stand beside you for 8 to 12 hours a day.
Yeah.
We better have compatibility, and I think even in our back of house, I would say, like, if you look at some of our really like strong core members at this point, they did not have mad kitchen skills when we hired them. They've worked their way up from dishwasher to fryer to prep, and they have become the solid backbone of our kitchen just because they're beautiful souls.
Yeah.
I think also
they're your base. They're your soup base.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
We make good Mystic Ramen. And that includes the staff, that soup that we've created, in terms of the personalities and characters that we have as part of our staff. I think also one thing I also reflect on, and I considered this, it just dawned on me that we also, I think when we hire, we sort of hire like-minded people, people who share the same interests and values. And one thing I can say about the majority of our staff is there's a lot of artists working for our restaurant. Everyone in some form or another at Mystic Ramen is also an artist. And I would say before I would call myself a chef, I'd say I'm an artist. And I could say that for most of our team as well. So I think there's this very creative, very creative core to the business. Creative people, quirky people, a lot of personality, but we made sure that we put a great effort into as we're saying, making good soup, and that we want the environment to feel relaxed and drama free as much as possible. And so we hired with that in mind. Do these people work well together as a group?
Yeah, I mean, it's really funny that you say that, because if you think, I don't know if you ever remember the movie from the 90s, like Water for Chocolate.
Yep.
Yeah. And she, whatever emotion she was feeling was how the people would feel when they ate the food. And people have often asked me for years, like, what is it that's so good about Mystic Ramen? Like, what's the special ingredient or the secret ingredient? And I say that it's the love. And I genuinely believe that. Like, these are, dedicated, passionate human beings who are happy to be where they are. They're happy to be with the people they're working with. You know, they're all very friendly and get along so beautifully. They take care of each other outside of the restaurant as well.
Yes.
And I think that you taste it. I think you taste the difference in this, you know?
People care.
Yeah.
People care so deeply. Like I've heard people like getting so irate about the quality of something that comes in, or like how, you know, oh, these eggs got smashed around. You know, they just care so deeply.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've told this story before, but when in the early days, we would bring our children to the interview. And if the potential didn't engage with our child, we didn't hire them. Cause like this age, it really was only because we didn't have a babysitter. So it was really something that it was more
happy accident if ever I heard one. That's great.
But we noticed that there were specific people who would like literally pull away from our children, and we're like, where are you hiring? Like, what are you applying for? You're going to be working with this demographic for a good long chunk of time. So I always found that really, really interesting. So here, final question. This has been so fun to chat, but let's say you open a second location tomorrow. Where would you refuse to compromise, and what would you redesign entirely, if anything?
I would refuse to open a restaurant that didn't have walk-in fridges and freezers ever again.
I think space has been a theme for us from the beginning at the market, and still for a year, and we've outgrown our current location. We can't accommodate, I think, the full potential that of customers that want to come in on a regular basis, especially on the weekends. But the space itself, it's a 200-year-old heritage building, and it was formerly two separate spaces. And the basement, it wasn't designed for a restaurant, initially. So definitely space,
like
refrigeration
space. You can see the kakigori machine living in our home office because there's nowhere to keep things.
Every cranny, Mystic Ramen filled with stuff, and especially when it comes to the kitchen in the back of the house, our prep kitchen is maximized. We can't grow anymore in the space we're in because we don't have any more room for product, really, at the end of the day. So it's that's something certainly.
That's definitely something that I would refuse to compromise. For sure.
Yeah.
And
I think aside from that, I mean, there's still the dedication to consistency in the product that we make. I don't want to take shortcuts. I don't get into it, just mass producing what we do or creating concentrates so that we can franchise out in that way that some other, ramen chains and business models have to use, because that's the only way that they can control the sort of labor and create consistency. Is at some point, if you're going to expand and create other locations, then I can't multiply myself. So like it becomes, that's the challenge. And then, well, how do you do that? Well, it's batch cooking. It's making, it's scaling up on that level of production. And sometimes I find that if you get too big, then the quality starts to be compromised. And because you have to create some kind of shortcuts to make it efficient. And I don't be, it's not me poo-pooing on, ramen chains as a general rule. It's just that's one model, and do it that way in order to make the numbers work. And that's something I'm very wary of, is like, if scaling up, if I ever did want to scale up and expand, I couldn't compromise our approach.
Yeah, for sure.
Nice.
Couldn't compromise the approach, and I don't think we could not compromise on like the living wage and the great work environment. Like that would be, would never want anything different.
Yeah, definitely. I have to say, like, I think your restaurant is like for restaurants. Like, I think you nail everything perfectly. It's always a pleasure to go there. It's always, I've always had a good time. Every attention to detail is, I just want to thank you for coming on the show. I've loved this conversation. And
Thanks.
everyone should go to Mystic Ramen. And yeah, any closing thoughts or words you want to say to people?
Well, I want to say, like, we love your business too. And we're just so impressed with how our youngest son has, like, he was practicing his song the other night, and Noah and I were standing behind him, like, what? Listen to this kid, you know?
Oh, he
So
is.
same thing. You guys are doing a great job over at Footprints. And I think that's
Thank
one of the
you.
things that I love so much about small business in Hamilton. And I don't have that much experience with small business elsewhere, although I did have a business in Toronto for a number of years. But I think small business in Hamilton is just so special because I think we all really support each other so beautifully. And it's one of my favorite things. And that's also why we love having this business in Hamilton, because Hamilton is so small business, mom and pop shop proud and supportive. And I don't know that Mystic Ramen would have succeeded to the level that it has anywhere but here.
Yeah,
We're so
agreed.
grateful.
I used to, even though we started in Toronto, by the end of it, I used to dread going. It was the long drive, everything, and there is something here that is like a warm hug. I know that sounds cheesy, but it really is.
Oh,
Yeah, that's amazing. Heather and
Yeah,
Noah,
and
you
I
got yeah. Oh, one more thought, Noah.
one more thought. I think just to wrap it up for me, um, is gratitude. Really, as you say, like the community in Hamilton, uh, and our customer base. I just want to say thank you to all of them because it's really those people who have become dedicated and loyal Mystic Ramen heads. Their continued support and the continued support of this community, they really, the way that this community supports local and small businesses, uh, it's just, I have so much gratitude for our customers and the people who continue to show up for us every single day. Uh, you know, thank you.
That's amazing. Perfect way to end it. Awesome, guys. We'll talk soon and take care.
thanks, Alex. It's been a pleasure.